It's time to go on the record with WRAL News.
Good evening and welcome to On the Record. State lawmakers returned to Raleigh this week to kick off the 2025 long session. They were officially sworn in Wednesday. After a decade, the House has a new speaker, Representative Destin Hall from Caldwell County, and a new governor to deal with, and Democratic Governor Josh Stein. The opening day made it clear the top priority for the House, the Senate, and the governor this session will be rebuilding Western North Carolina. Caldwell County Republican Destin Hall was elected House Speaker, the first new speaker in a decade. He succeeds longtime Speaker Tim Moore, who's now serving in Congress. Hall is a native of Western North Carolina, and he pledged to get to work quickly on relief for survivors of Hurricane Helene.
The number one priority of this body, starting today, because today is day one, is doing all we can to rebuild Western North Carolina. To my friends in the mountains in the West, I know that you're not forgotten.
To the people of Western North Carolina, you are not, you will not be forgotten. We will work tirelessly to ensure that our response to Hurricane Helene does not leave you behind.
Relief for storm survivors was also a main theme for Senate Leader Phil Berger. He said the recovery effort in Western North Carolina cannot repeat the same mistakes that were made in Eastern North Carolina.
We must take a renewed look at how we prepare for and respond to natural disasters in our state.
Hall told reporters he has spoken with new Democratic Governor Josh Stein. He said they'll work with Stein in good faith.
And one of the things everybody's going to agree on is we got to get people back in their homes as quickly as possible. And so I hope that politics don't get in the way of that. I know our caucus is not going to let it.
Tonight to preview the upcoming session is Speaker Destin Hall. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Speaker.
Thanks for having me.
And we're also joined by Deputy House Democratic Leader Cynthia Ball here in the studio. Thanks very much to you too, Representative Ball. Speaker Hall, I want to start with you. You're the youngest speaker in modern memory at 37 years old. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as they said in the intro, I'm from Western North Carolina. I'm from Caldwell County. That's where I live today. I'm a general practice attorney here. Lived in Charlotte for a little while and practiced law when I got out of law school before I came back home, and have been home ever since. I ran for state house back in 2016. I got elected, served as rules chair for some time in the state house, which in many ways is like being the speaker on training wheels. Of course, Tim Moore was the rules chair for then Speaker Tillis, and then I was rules chair for Speaker Moore. And now that Speaker Moore, now Congressman Moore, is going on to D.C., I've got the honor of serving on behalf of my colleagues as the Speaker of the State House.
Well, as you mentioned, you were part of former Speaker Tim Moore's leadership team. How will your leadership style differ from his, or do you think we'll see an appreciable difference?
Well, I think every session is different. And so in many ways, every caucus is different. You get different personalities in. You get folks with different talents. And so that changes things quite a bit from session to session. But of course, I also have my own ideas. Speaker Moore, he came along in public service sort of a generation before I did. He served in the minority for some time before Republicans took the majority in 2010. And when I came in, we were in a supermajority. And so since then, I've served in a regular majority for a while, and then in a supermajority again, and now in a working supermajority, of course. But I'll also say I know I've got big shoes to fill with Speaker Tillis and Speaker Moore coming before me, and with some of the great work that they've done in North Carolina over a decade and a half, and we want to continue that work.
Well, as you mentioned, you are one vote shy of a supermajority this session. That's a little change from last year. How do you think, this is a question for both of you, now how do you think that's going to change how the parties work together this year? Speaker Hall, you go first.
Well, one thing I'll note is that most of the bills that we vote on at the General Assembly are not contentious bills. Probably more than 90% of them are near unanimous votes. And so it's only a small chunk of bills that actually get contentious, and the kind of bills where we need to really work together because there may be disagreements between the two sides of the aisle. But what you've seen, and we've been in this situation before with a simple majority, not having a supermajority, and we've still been able to operate. I think especially now that we have 71 Republicans as of today, and we're going to continue to work on that number. But I think that you'll see on just about any given issue, there will be one of our friends on the other side of the aisle who will be able to compromise with and get a vote. That will require compromise on both sides, but that's the business of the General Assembly. That is what the place is there for. Folks have sent us there to make decisions based on a wide array of different views, and our job is to come together and try to figure out a solution that we can get across the finish line. And I'm confident we'll continue to do that this session.
Representative Ball, there was a little bit of bad blood in December and November. Things were a little tense between the supermajority and your party. Do you think Democrats are ready to move past that?
Absolutely. North Carolinians elected us to come here and represent all of them and to work together. We have, I guess, what you might call a split government. And we are determined to remain together to help put some pressure, I hate to use that word, that sounds too authoritative, but some incentive, I like that one better, with the leadership of the House to work with us, Democrats, but also to work with Governor Stein. And I hope we can do more working together, common ground, all of that, because the North Carolinians expect it.
In his last comment, the speaker made a joke about possibly people, pardon me, switching to the Republican Party, but we saw that happen in 2023, right? Democrats kind of took a hit when Tricia Cotham switched parties. She and some other members of your caucus, pardon me, have said that the Democrats were heavy-handed and inflexible in sort of trying to force that party block voting to maintain the pressure, the leverage you were just talking about. Do you think that's going to be different this session under Governor Stein?
I hope so. I hope that others don't feel that way this time. I'm sorry that some member did feel that way. I do know there was more communication with her than I believe she talked about. But anyway, that's that, and we're here now. We are committed to standing together, working with each of our members, listening to each of our members, no matter what part of the state, rural, more metropolitan and so forth, because we are committed to making sure that North Carolina has legislation that benefits all of North Carolina, not just the metropolitan areas, but we have some challenges, Western North Carolina, as we all know, and we have some rural parts of the state that don't have broadband and have challenges in recruiting teachers and businesses and so forth. So we have a lot of work to do.
Well, we're going to be talking about some of that work when we come back on the other side of this break. We hope you'll stay with us. Welcome back to On the Record. If you're just joining us tonight, we're previewing the upcoming legislative session with new House Speaker Destin Hall and House Deputy Democratic Leader Cynthia Ball. Thank you both of us for joining us. One message that came through loud and clear on opening day was that relief and recovery for Western North Carolina is at the top of the priority list. Speaker Hall, you said you plan to move quickly on that because we've gotten some federal money now. Do you have a time frame in mind?
Yes, Laura. So the first thing I'll tell you, today we announced a select committee in the House on Hurricane Helene recovery, and they've already started working now. Of course, we got a big jolt in the arm from a congressional action that sent somewhere around $100 billion or so in storm relief. We've got to figure out how much of that exactly North Carolina is going to get, how it has to be appropriated, which parts of it does the state legislature need to deal with, which parts of it was just direct federal appropriations. And so those things are what we are going through right now. This committee will, I expect, meet even before our session actually begins at the end of the month. But what we know is the need is there right now, and it is an urgent need with the bad winter weather coming, freezing temperatures in Western North Carolina. We have to act right now. And so we've started doing that. And I think you're going to continue to see us work very hard on storm relief in Western North Carolina. And we're going to make sure that the mistakes that were made in the Cooper administration in Eastern North Carolina don't happen again. You know, you have folks there who have been out of their homes now for 8 years, thousands of people still out of their homes. We can't let that happen ever again in this state anywhere. And so we're going to fix the issues in the eastern part, and we're going to make sure those don't happen in Western North Carolina as we go through this process of storm recovery.
Sure. Now, Representative Ball, your caucus criticized the Republicans in those last couple of sessions for not doing enough for things like rent assistance or small business grants in those two relief bills that already passed. What are Democrats hoping to see in this next round?
Well, we're hoping to see addressing all the concerns that Speaker Hall mentioned, most especially the people that don't have anywhere to live, and especially if we lose power now, they're going to be thrown back behind. I agree with Speaker Hall. We need to do it. I wish we were still in session. This break, I think we should still be working. And in this interim, I am hoping to speak with Speaker Hall as well as the rest of his team to talk about ways that we can work together, get started, and get the money, decide where it's going to go, find out where it's going to go, and get it to where it needs to be.
Yeah. Well, how do you, and this is a question for both of you, how do you envision Helene relief fitting into the state budget that both of your parties are going to be putting together this session?
Well, I'll say this, as Representative Ball said, working together on its key. Everybody agrees that we need to help the folks in Western North Carolina, just like we need to get the problems in the eastern part of the state with hurricane relief fixed as well. That's a bipartisan issue. No matter whose constituents we're talking about, everybody agrees these are problems that we have to fix. And so it's going to be a number of things that we have to do. You're talking about probably a $50 billion plus problem in Western North Carolina. That's why it was so important for us to get those federal funds that thankfully Senator Tillis, Senator Budd, and our great folks in the congressional delegation worked very hard to get. Senator Berger and I went to D.C. along with then Speaker Moore to meet with our federal delegation, again, to urge Congress. We met with some of the appropriations chairs, urging them to get those funds to Western North Carolina as quickly as they possibly could. And thankfully, they acted quickly. And so now that's part of the process our select committee is looking at. Literally today, I had a call earlier with staff about the things that we're going to need to do as a result of the congressional legislation. So we've got to get folks back in homes. We got to get their homes repaired. But in the interim, where folks don't have anywhere to go, it can never be the case in North Carolina that a person displaced by a storm goes without shelter. And we're going to do everything possible to make sure that doesn't happen.
I hear what you're saying about the $50+ billion price tag for this, but I don't think anybody's expecting the federal government to cover the entire tab, right? The state's going to have to chip in. Do you have concerns about what that might mean for other areas in state government?
Well, I do, but I want to make a comment about something that Speaker Hall said. I think we worked pretty well together. You said we challenged some of the things that were done in the first two relief bills. We thought we needed more specific things done in specific ways, but the third bill that we didn't really think of was much of a bill for relief. You did hear, and even members of Speaker Hall's party disagreed. And so we don't want to see that again, whether it means trying to get a Democrat to vote with them on something. So I want us to work together. I'm a mediator, and I ran on that, and I continue to believe that the most important thing we can do is work together. Best government is when everybody doesn't get everything that they want. And the majority has not allowed us to be behind some of those closed doors and discuss some things. So that's where we'd like to be more this time.
All right, just want to go back to something else that Speaker Hall mentioned, and that is the debacle that we saw in Western North Carolina from the Rebuild NC and NCORE folks. I understand that certainly made lawmakers skeptical of one of the first things that the new Governor Stein did was to go set up a new sort of program that was not NCORE to manage recovery in Western North Carolina. But are we running the risk at this point of this becoming a political football between the Democrats in the mansion and the Republicans at the legislature?
Well, I don't think so, Laura, because, as you just mentioned, incoming Governor Stein very clearly has acknowledged that NCORE needed to change. The first step in fixing a problem is admitting one exists. And so you see Governor Stein come out of the gate and completely abandon NCORE on Western North Carolina storm relief. I don't think there's much of a case to be made that NCORE has been successful really in any way at all. You had the executive director come to the legislature and testify that they're essentially missing hundreds of millions of dollars, and then she resigns or is fired. We don't know which. A couple days later. So it's been a complete and utter disaster. And again, that's not a partisan issue. I would say that no matter who the governor was at the time, and I'm glad that Governor Stein is attempting to go in a different direction. And we're going to do all we can to work with him in good faith because clearly a change needed to be made. It's completely unacceptable. I think that it's a national scandal. It's a tragedy. I think it's underreported in many ways. It's hard to believe in the United States of America that somebody who loses their home would still be in a hotel 8 years later because the government couldn't get its act together. We can never let that happen again in this state.
Well, Representative Ball, sorry, pardon me. I knew I was going to do that sooner or later.
By the way, sometimes when the speaker would call on Representative Hall at the time, it sounded like you were saying Representative Ball. The first time I got there, we came in at the same time, Speaker. I think you remember that. You were freshman chair, I was freshman chair, then we gradually moved into different leadership positions. So we are. I was going to say seatmates, but sort of seatmates.
Well, I just want to go back real quickly to something that he was talking about. I mean, I will say, in fairness to the Cooper administration, that program, NCORE and Rebuild NC, did get tens of thousands of people into homes. You're absolutely right. There are far too many who were not, but it was at a complete failure. Representative Ball, what do you have to say to this? Do you worry about this becoming politicized?
Well, too much has become too politicized in North Carolina, so I hope not. I do know that Governor Stein has already put in place someone who's going to focus on that. One of my friends, as a matter of fact, from Wake County, Matt Calabria, is going to be working on the Western North Carolina relief effort, and we believe that's a really good choice. He's not going to do it alone, but we're going to be able to, I think, Speaker Hall and those of us in the Democratic side of the House will be trying to get information. We have a delegation, the Buncombe delegation is entirely Democrat. So they have given us a lot of input and a lot of pressure about making sure that certain things are done that were not done. I know we did a whole lot, but we could have done more, and I want us to see us out the gate. I hope we will be able to have some actions ready to go as soon as we come back for votes.
Well, speaking of coming back, we're going to come back here in a moment. We hope you'll stay with us here on the Record. Welcome back to On the Record's legislative preview with Speaker Destin Hall and Representative Cynthia Ball, both in the State House. Let's finish up by talking about the biggest share of state spending, and that is, of course, education. Despite years of small raises for teachers that Republicans have talked about, North Carolina is, as Democrats have talked about, once again near the bottom of the states when it comes to per pupil funding. Speaker Hall, you talked about the importance of education in your acceptance speech this week. Can we expect to see more funding for schools this year?
Yeah, I think you're going to continue to see that. I know virtually every budget since I've been in the legislature, and I'm now in my fifth term, we've continued to add to the funding in education in North Carolina. We've done that in a number of different ways. You've seen us fund the Opportunity Scholarships program that lets parents choose the best school for their particular child to be able to succeed. But there's no question we want to continue to invest in public schools because we want to have a competitive economic environment. Part of that is having a good tax environment, having a low regulatory environment, and you've seen Republicans do that for a decade and a half now, and it's really made our economy take off. But our competitive advantage, in addition to that great business climate that we have, it's our human resources, our people of our state. We've got probably the best university system in the world. We've got a world-class community college system, and same thing in our K-12 education system. And so that is an important part of North Carolina's growth and its future. And I know you've seen the State House in particular on a number of occasions continue to try to raise the bar and continue to raise that funding. And we're going to keep doing that in this session. We also want to make sure that folks who are going to get their education in North Carolina to become teachers, that they stay here and that they build their careers in North Carolina. And again, I think you're going to continue to see a push to do that in the upcoming session.
Representative Ball, Democrats have said for a long time that the state was basically rolling in record surpluses, and yet not enough of that money found its way to schools. What do you want to see the state do this year?
Well, it's a long list. How long do we have? we need universal pre-K. We need school food breakfast, lunch provided to everyone. We also need a more robust teacher pipeline. We have teachers that get burned out because they're not making enough money and they don't have enough support in the schools. We have problems in almost every school. I've run bills with Republican primary sponsors to try to get more school counselors, nurses, and so forth in our schools. And the teachers now have to take on some of that. So it starts at birth. We need to be taking care of our people in better ways and so forth. And then I want to add something. I'm a public school advocate. It's one of the top priorities when I ran, but I'm also very concerned about us making sure we are getting our people who may not want to go or should not necessarily find their way into the university system. Our community college system is the best in the country, I think. And I have done a lot of talking about that, and we need to do some more work between the community colleges and our high schools to get people prepared for the workforce.
Well, both of you actually mentioned the same kind of thing, which is getting people to come to North Carolina, go to school in North Carolina, and stay here. You know, Speaker Hall, you mentioned that in your acceptance speech as one of the things that you were really focused on. But we know, as people who've watched this state for a long time, state leaders in both parties have really grappled with this problem for a long time, trying to get those areas that are declining in population to become vibrant areas again and get the young people to come back to these communities. I'm curious to hear from each of you, like, what do you think should be done to make that work?
Well, I'll start that by saying, I've lived it myself. I'm from rural North Carolina. I'm from Caldwell County. When I got out of law school, I practiced in Charlotte, and I came back home. I was raised with my grandparents, and I wanted to help them out some. And what I found when I came back was that my area, like a lot of other rural areas across North Carolina, they're really thirsting for young folks to come back and not just to come there and work, but to be involved in leadership roles, to be involved in their community. So there's tremendous opportunity there, lower costs of living. And so if you can come back and make it work, I think that a lot of folks will find there is opportunity in those areas. There's no question that the state government has a role to play in making sure that we're creating an economic environment in those areas where folks can be successful. That's why you've seen us try to do things to sort of up the local supplements and help them with teacher pay in rural North Carolina. You've seen us put different capital investments across rural North Carolina. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to those things. But as I said the other day when we started session, I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, or any other party, if you've got an idea about how we can get young folks to come back to rural North Carolina, I'm all for it, because I think it's just so good for our state if we can get folks to do that.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there. I'm sorry, Representative Ball, but we are running out of time. But if you have something to say about tonight's discussion, you can email us your comments, questions, or criticisms on the record at WRAL.com. A big thank you once again to Representative Cynthia Ball and Speaker Destin Hall from the House for joining us this evening for this preview, and thanks for watching.